Welcome back to A Slice of Health, where health comes alive, with bite-sized health education to keep you moving and become your own health champion, with stories that heal and knowledge that empowers. But before we jump into our topic for today, I want to tell you a story. Rebecca is a 32-year-old woman who has been told that she likely has some of the features of insulin resistance. Her doctor said this to her at her last appointment when she was diagnosed with something called PCOS. She's been hearing about PCOS in the news, on social media, on YouTube. Most women that she meets happen to seem to have this condition called PCOS. So when she went into her doctor to try to get a diagnosis, she was told that she did have it. Unfortunately, she's quite concerned because although she had heard that it might be linked to struggles with weight, fertility, and acne, she didn't really know much about what the condition really was, what it meant, and what she could do about it. She was of the opinion that it meant that she might have access to medication that might help her lose some weight. But the doctor said to her that her problem was insulin resistance and she needs to make some lifestyle changes. She's quite confused. She doesn't know what insulin resistance means. She doesn't know what PCOS means. She feels more confused now than she did at the beginning of the consultation and her journey to getting a diagnosis. So, what exactly is insulin resistance? And what does it mean in relation to PCOS? Is this something that she should be concerned about? Is the doctor's comment that it is linked to PCOS actually true? Here's what we know. Insulin resistance is actually a rather complex condition. It's a situation where the body doesn't respond the way it should to something called insulin. And as a result of not responding properly to insulin, lots of different health conditions can come about and they can become problematic. First of all, before we talk about the resistance to insulin, let's talk about insulin first. Insulin is a hormone that's produced by the body, specifically your pancreas. Insulin helps to move sugar or glucose from the food that you eat into your cells, where it is then used to produce energy. So insulin is sort of a key that unlocks your cells and allows glucose to go in. Once glucose goes into your cells, then your cells function and they produce energy for you to do all of your life activities which you need, because glucose is really fuel for your body. Now, insulin resistance then happens in a situation where your body is not as sensitive to insulin anymore. And because insulin is really essential for your life and managing your sugar levels, it can have a knock-on effect on the rest of your body. So this is what happens. Over time, as blood sugar levels start to increase, your body's ability or insulin's ability to unlock the cells and get glucose in properly begins to become affected. And so your body, your muscles, your fat, your liver stop responding to insulin the way that they're supposed to. Now, insulin resistance is not actually a condition of diabetes. You don't need to have diabetes to have insulin resistance. In fact, insulin resistance can be a temporary situation. It can happen in a short period of time due to several factors, including some use of certain medications like steroids. And it can also be chronic. And by chronic, we mean that it can then be a long-term process or long-term problem that has a knock-on effect on lots of different conditions. So, what else do we know about insulin resistance? Insulin resistance can be caused by lots of different factors. Like we said, when the glucose or sugar levels in the bloodstream become so high that insulin is not effectively able to unlock the cells to get the glucose used, we have this problem of resistance. Things that can increase the risk of having insulin resistance are things like being overweight, especially carrying excess weight around the belly, having limited physical activity, so things like walking, doing weights, cardio, having a family history of type 2 diabetes. As our age increases, the likelihood of insulin resistance also increases. And that is as a result of compounding factors such as just time, but then also a compounding factor of lifestyle activities in addition to time. Other medical conditions increase the risk of having insulin resistance, and it can then be a looping factor where one thing contributes to one, and then having that condition then recontributes to insulin resistance. Something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, fatty liver. These are things that can increase the risk. So, what kind of signs and symptoms should we be looking out for if we're concerned about insulin resistance? One of the main things is fatigue and tiredness, especially after eating, difficulty losing weight, having increased hunger and craving for things that are sweet, like carbs, snacks, cakes, having increasing weight gain, especially around your waistline, dark velvety patches of skin around the neck, armpits, and groin, high blood pressure, increasing thirst, and increasing need to pass urine are some of the signs of insulin resistance. Now, there are some other conditions that can in themselves contribute to insulin resistance, such as Cushing's syndrome, which we mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about cortisol, a condition called acromegaly that can increase insulin resistance, a condition called hypothyroidism that makes your thyroid gland underactive so it doesn't produce as much thyroid hormone. And thyroid hormone really helps your metabolism. And so when the levels are lower, it can also contribute to insulin resistance. Sometimes some inherited genetic conditions can cause insulin resistance as well. So how exactly do we diagnose insulin resistance? We can do some blood tests to have a look at glucose levels. We can do some blood tests to have a look at lipid levels, asking questions about family history, medical history, and signs and symptoms as well. Now, the main question that we have here is PCOS and insulin resistance linked? The short answer is yes, they are linked. Can insulin resistance be treated? As we know, in healthcare, there are different kinds of risk factors that can be changed and risk factors that cannot be changed. Things that cannot be changed are things like your family history or having a genetic condition, unless, a miracle happens and a genetic condition disappears. However, the conditions that are modifiable, things that can be changed, can actually help to contribute to reducing the risk or the severity of insulin resistance. Things like eating whole, nutritious foods, losing excess weight, getting good physical activity, working intentionally to reduce blood pressure and blood glucose levels are quite important. And then there are some medications that can help. So medications to manage blood pressure, to reduce sugar levels, and to reduce cholesterol can also help manage insulin resistance. So because insulin resistance has the potential to be reversed if there are reversible conditions, then definitely lifestyle changes can make a difference. The things that we eat have a major impact on our blood sugar, our blood glucose, our insulin levels, and our weight. So really thinking about foods that cause a slower rise in blood sugar and don't put as much pressure on our pancreas to release insulin is really the way to go. Foods like meat, fish, vegetables that are Fibrous like asparagus, cauliflower, and leafy greens. Beans and legumes are really good. And these kind of foods are called low glycemic index foods. And what that means is they release sugar in a slower fashion. Foods, on the other hand, like white bread and potatoes, cakes and cookies, release sugar really rapidly, and this puts the pancreas under a lot of pressure to produce insulin. So, what exactly are we talking about when we say insulin resistance is something that we must be aware of or we should think about, or when we say it's a complex condition? Well, insulin resistance, if not managed properly, if not addressed, can lead to heart disease, metabolic syndrome, additional hormonal concerns, or even type 2 diabetes. However, with good addressing of the cause, managing the severity, and making interventions for lifestyle, we can actually start to see an improvement in insulin resistance. So, what's our recommendation today? Is to have a conversation about the diagnosis of PCOS and insulin resistance and come up with, firstly, a lifestyle management plan on what to do, changes to make on a daily basis. The second thing is to have a conversation about the potential of medication that she can take that can also help reduce the severity of insulin resistance, but then also medication that she might take that might help support her, but that can also help reduce her blood sugar levels if needed. So that's it for me from today. Blood sugar, insulin resistance, and PCOS have a high correlation factor, and insulin resistance is highly linked to a lot of metabolic and hormonal imbalance issues. So that's it for me from today. Until I'm back in your ear tomorrow with stories that heal and knowledge that empowers. Bye for now.